Good afternoon. This is Dolly with Good Life Gardenscapes. I wanted to share something with you. If you notice in my garden bed, there's some leftover paper that hadn't broken down, a couple little eggshells, and stuff like that. I put manure in here. I don't use any kind of fertilizing as far as coming out of a chemical bag or all these fertilizers that they sell. I know somebody who has a horse farm and they raise chickens and roosters, and they give me whatever bedding they pull out at the end of how many weeks, and I let it sit in my yard. It usually sits here about 2 years before I get to it. And I also use alfalfa. This is alfalfa, and what I've done, I've let it sit out here for 2 years, and I little by little use it. And this is when I'm prepping beds, I use all organic matter. I don't use any of the Miracle Grow. I do use that stuff, but I use it in house plants because I'm not going to eat them, and I don't want them to grow too fast. And that's the thing. People use a lot of fertilizers so that they get production. But what happens is worms cannot eat fertilizers. They need food. They need composted materials. They need garden beds that are, I periodically throw grass clippings, food wastes, and it's only limited to bones. I even throw meat in here sometimes. I'll bury it, not when the plant is growing, but when I'm prepping before it's time to start putting things back in the ground. Here's the strawberries. If you could see the alfalfa, it didn't quite all break down before I had to put the strawberry sets in there. So what happens is when you're using your Miracle Grow and all that stuff, you're killing the organic life. There's a life in your earth. It's worms, little bugs, and these live off of the composting process and the food, the living matter that you throw in your garden beds. So what happens is if you're feeding them that, it's killing all the stuff that actually breaks down the soil and makes it usable for the plants. And see, the plants have to work to get those nutrients. Those roots, you'll notice it'll grow through little pieces of wood in there. They'll grow, the roots go through the grass. So they're doing a job so that they can produce something. They need to make seed. So I don't ever suggest, all these websites promote buying their fertilizer or whatever else they're selling. And also all the people on YouTube, they all set up shops and they're all selling you something. You don't have to spend that money. Enjoy the information they're giving you. But truly and honestly, I don't suggest buying any fertilizers from anybody because you don't know if they're cheating. And you don't know if they're adding things invisibly. I use eggshells. How do I use them? I grind them up in the grinder. I throw them in vinegar, let that sit for a couple of days. I drain the vinegar. You can throw it in your garden somewhere and it turns into food or whatever. But then those eggshells will break down much more easier when you turn it into your soil or even top dress. When you put in your compost on the top, mix it into the compost, the sun also does a job. It helps break down all that stuff because that's just the way the earth was designed. So don't get caught up in buying all these different so quote unquote organic fertilizers because you should be composting, throwing all your food away. Your garbage shouldn't smell. Cardboard can be buried in there and it breaks, the little bugs break it down, the roots go through it. So it's being used, whatever resource it's going to provide to your garden to grow your plants. And so, because I was on YouTube and everybody's selling something and they're telling you need to do all this stuff and you don't. Just throw your leaves in there, grind them up, put them in a little mini composter. I bought one of those. Let it break down naturally. Just throw it in the ground and the bugs will do their work. In the fall, when you clean up your garden, I throw everything back in there. I don't put it anywhere. Come spring, you can't even find everything you broke down and buried in your garden simply because the bugs are doing their job. The worms are creating more worms, and they're leaving every time they eat that stuff, they're leaving a compost behind that the plants can use. So coffee ground, eggshells, all that. Mix it in with your compost, top dress it, and leave it there until it's time for you to start planting in that bed again. Thanks. This is Dolly.